The fitness center buzzed with excitement as music pulsed through the room. Friends, family, and loyal clients had gathered to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Sterling Fitness, a boutique gym owned by Victor Sterling. Victor stood near the stage, his signature grin plastered on his face as he thanked guests for their support. His wife, Amelia, stood by his side, her sequin dress catching the light with every movement. Amelia had been Victor's unwavering partner in the gym's rise to success. Behind her composed demeanor, however, a storm brewed. For months, Shed noticed Victor growing distant. Late nights at the gym, secretive phone calls, and a change in his demeanor that she couldn't ignore. Tonight, Amelia had come armed with answers to the questions that had haunted her. Victor was midway through his speech when Amelia stepped forward, taking the microphone from his hand. Her smile was tight, but her voice remained steady. "Thank you all for coming," she began, addressing the crowd. "Tonight is not just a celebration of this incredible gym, but also a celebration of truth." She turned toward Victor, her eyes locking onto his. "A truth that I've uncovered after months of doubt and heartbreak." The room fell silent, the upbeat music now a faint hum in the background. Victor's confident expression faltered. "For the past year, my husband has been leading a double life," Amelia continued, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Not just as the owner of Sterling."
Before I continue, my friends, I kindly ask you to subscribe to my channel. It only takes a second for you, but it's a huge boost of motivation for me to keep creating videos. I'd also greatly appreciate your comments. Thank you for your support. Now, let's get back to the story.
With both anger and sorrow, a collective gasp swept through the audience as they turned their attention to Marcus, a personal trainer who had worked at Sterling Fitness for years. He stood frozen near the bar, his face draining of color. Victor stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Amelia, this isn't the place." "It is the place," she interrupted sharply. "This is where it all started. Late nights, personal training sessions, private moments that weren't about business." Marcus's silence spoke volumes, his body language betraying him. The guests, initially stunned, now murmured among themselves, some shooting accusatory glances at Victor and Marcus. "I supported you through everything," Amelia continued, her voice rising. "And this is how you repay me? By humiliating me? By lying to me?" Victor reached for her arm, but she pulled away. "Save it," she said, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I deserve better, and so does the truth." The tension in the room became unbearable. Some guests quietly made their way toward the exit, unwilling to witness the unraveling of the Sterling's picture-perfect life. Others remained, transfixed by the spectacle. Finally, Marcus broke his silence. "Amelia, I'm sorry," he said softly, but his apology, while earnest, only deepened the betrayal etched on her face. Victor stood there, his carefully constructed image in tatters. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The man who had spent his life crafting a persona of strength and control now looked powerless. Amelia took one last look at Victor before turning on her heel and walking out of the room. Her departure was followed by an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint clinking of glasses and the whispers of stunned guests. For Victor, the night had been meant to mark a milestone in his career. Instead, it became the moment his life came crashing down, exposed under the glaring lights of the fitness center he'd worked so hard to build. The night ended in a blur of muted conversations and hasty goodbyes. Victor sat alone in his office at the gym, the celebration decorations still hanging mockingly above him. His mind raced, but no coherent thought could cut through the fog of shame and panic. Outside, the parking lot emptied, leaving only a few cars under the dim fluorescent lights. Marcus entered quietly, his usual confidence replaced by hesitation. He shut the door behind him, leaning against it as though he needed its support. "Victor," Marcus began softly, "we need to talk." Victor looked up, his face etched with exhaustion. "Talk? About what?" "How everything I built is ruined. How my wife just exposed my private life to half the city." His voice cracked, betraying his anguish. You knew this would catch up to us, Marcus replied. You said you were ready to handle it, but I didn't think this was how it would happen. Victor interrupted, slamming his hand on the desk. She wasn't supposed to know. Marcus flinched but held his ground. She knew because you were careless. We both were. His voice softened. And maybe that's because we weren't meant to keep hiding. Victor buried his face in his hands. For years, he juggled the delicate balance between his public and private lives, convincing himself he could have both without consequences. Now, everything lay in ruins, his marriage, his reputation, and likely his business. She'll take everything, Victor said, his voice muffled. The gym, the house. My whole life is tied to her. And the worst part is, she's right. I lied to her. Marcus moved closer, cautiously placing a hand on Victor's shoulder. You lied to yourself, too. But maybe it's time to stop. You can't fix this by running from it anymore. Victor pulled away, glaring at Marcus. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who's going to lose everything. No, Marcus replied quietly, but I'm the one who's been living in the shadows with you, watching you suffer, pretending you're okay, when you're not. I can't keep doing this, Victor. If you're not willing to face it, maybe this us was never real to begin with. The words hit Victor harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to argue but found himself unable to speak. Marcus shook his head, stepping back toward the door. Figure out what you really want, Victor, he said before leaving. Because I can't wait around for someone who doesn't even know who he is. As the door clicked shut, Victor was left alone once again. The weight of Marcus's words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, he felt the full scope of the choices he had made, and the wreckage they had caused. The silence didn't last long. A sharp knock at the door broke through the stillness. Victor froze, his heart racing. He opened the door cautiously, half expecting to see Amelia, ready to deliver the final blow. Instead, it was Daniel, one of the gym's longtime clients and a close family friend. Mind if I come in? Daniel asked, his tone unreadable. Without waiting for an answer, he stepped inside and shut the door behind him. Victor sighed, slumping back into his chair. If you're here to lecture me, save it. I've heard enough for one night. I'm not here to lecture, Daniel said, taking a seat across from him. But you should know Amelia isn't done. She's talking to lawyers. And she's talking to the press. Victor's blood ran cold. The press? Why would she? Because she's hurt. And when people are hurt, they want revenge, Daniel said bluntly. But this isn't just about her. It's about you, Victor. What you choose to do next will define how this all ends. Victor stared at the floor, his mind spinning. He had spent years cultivating an image of strength, control, and success. Now he was faced with a choice. Continue to fight to preserve that image or finally confront the truth and the chaos it would unleash. For the first time in his life, Victor didn't know which path to take. Victor spent the night in his office, too restless to go home and too ashamed to face the world. The gym felt eerily quiet, the faint hum of the HVAC system the only sound as he stared at the framed photos on the wall. Each image, a ribbon-cutting ceremony, a charity event, a team-building retreat, seemed to mock him. By morning, the weight of Amelia's threats and Marcus's ultimatum pushed him toward a decision. He needed to act and fast. His first call was to Amelia, but unsurprisingly, it went straight to voicemail. He left a message anyway, his voice measured but tinged with desperation. Amelia, it's Victor. I know I've hurt you. I can't undo that, but we need to talk. Please, before this gets worse. Call me. Next, he dialed his lawyer, Stephen Grant. Stephen had been a friend as well as legal counsel, but Victor dreaded having to explain the mess he'd created. Victor, Stephen answered, his voice groggy. It's 7 a.m. What's going on? I need your help, Victor began, pacing the small office. Amelia's talking to lawyers and, apparently, the press. If this story gets out, I could lose the gym and everything else. Stephen sighed heavily. Victor, I can help with damage control, but you've got to be honest with me. Is there any way to fix things with her? If this goes public, it's not just your business at risk. Your reputation, your contracts, everything could implode. I know, Victor admitted. I'm trying to reach her, but she's not answering. Stephen paused. Then you've got two options. Try harder to make amends or prepare for war. But I'll warn you, if she's out for blood, this won't end cleanly. Meanwhile, Amelia sat in a sleek office overlooking the city skyline. Across from her was Rachel Moreno, a high-profile divorce attorney known for her ruthless approach to high-stakes cases. "I'm not here to destroy him," Amelia said, though her tone wavered. "I just want what's fair. The gym was as much my investment as his. I supported him through everything, and now he's humiliated me." Rachel leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes studying Amelia. "Fair is subjective, Mrs. Sterling. If you want to keep this civil, we can aim for a quiet settlement. But if you're willing to go public, we can leverage that to your advantage. It depends on how much you want to fight." Amelia hesitated. Her anger was still raw, but the idea of dragging their private life through the media made her stomach churn. "I don't know if I want to fight like that," she admitted. I want him to feel the consequences of what he's done." "Understood," Rachel replied, her tone pragmatic. "Let's start with the financials. Once we see where the leverage is, you can decide how far you want to go." By late afternoon, Victor finally managed to reach Amelia. She agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. When she arrived, she looked as composed as ever, but her guarded expression told Victor that forgiveness was a distant possibility. "Thank you for coming," Victor said, standing as she approached. She didn't respond, simply taking a seat across from him and folding her hands on the table. "Amelia, I know I've hurt you," Victor began. "I know I've lied, but I never wanted to disrespect you or our life together." "Disrespect?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "Victor, you didn't just disrespect me, you erased me. Every late night, every excuse, every moment you spent building something with someone else. Do you even understand what that's done to me?" "I do," he said, his voice low. "I let fear control me. Fear of losing everything, of losing you, and of admitting to myself who I really am. But that doesn't excuse what I did." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "No, it doesn't." Victor swallowed hard. "I don't want to fight you, Amelia. I want to find a way to make this right." She let out a bitter laugh. "Right? Victor, nothing about this is ever going to be right. You've destroyed my trust. You've made me question everything about our marriage. But if you're serious about making amends, you'll give me what I deserve. The house, my share of the gym, and a public apology. No excuses. No spin." Victor nodded slowly, the weight of her demands settling on him. "If that's what it takes," he said, his voice steady, "you'll have it." Amelia studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception. Finally, she stood. "I'll let Rachel handle the details. If you go back on your word, I won't hesitate to take this further." As she walked away, Victor felt both relief and despair. He had avoided a war, but the cost of peace was high. Now he had to face the other half of his life, the man he claimed to love but had pushed away in his quest to keep secrets. For the first time in his life, Victor realized the truth wasn't just something to confront. It was something to live. Whether he had the strength to do so remained to be seen. Victor spent the next week in limbo, juggling damage control with the remnants of his personal life. The gym staff whispered when they thought he wasn't around, and clients eyed him with a mix of curiosity and judgment. Word had started to spread, though thankfully, the story hadn't yet reached the media. Amelia, true to her word, had her lawyer draft a settlement. It was thorough, brutal, and undeniably fair. She demanded 50% of the gym's assets, full ownership of their home, and a formal public statement acknowledging his infidelity. Victor signed it without hesitation. Losing Amelia had already cost him more than money ever could. With the legalities in motion, he turned his attention to Marcus. The man he once shared stolen moments with had become distant, avoiding Victor's calls and ignoring his messages. One evening, after the gym had closed and the streets outside were bathed in the orange glow of streetlights, Victor made his way to Marcus's apartment. When Marcus opened the door, his expression was unreadable. He stepped aside silently, letting Victor in. The apartment was sparsely decorated, a stark contrast to Marcus's usually vibrant personality. "I wasn't sure if you'd show up," Marcus said finally, leaning against the kitchen counter. I wasn't sure if you'd let me in, Victor replied. Marcus shrugged. What do you want, Victor? Victor hesitated, his hands fidgeting. I wanted to talk, to explain, to apologize. Apologize for what? Marcus asked, his tone sharp. For lying to your wife? For dragging me into it? Or for pretending you were ready for something you clearly weren't? Victor flinched but held his ground. For all of it. I lied to everyone, Amelia, you, myself. I told myself I could have both worlds. But I wasn't brave enough to face the truth. And what's the truth? Marcus asked, crossing his arms. Victor took a deep breath. The truth is, I love you. I've loved you for a long time, but I was too afraid to admit it. I was terrified of losing everything I thought defined me. My marriage, my business, my reputation. But in trying to hold onto those things, I lost the one person who made me feel alive. Marcus's expression softened, but his walls remained firmly in place. Words are easy, Victor. You said you'd figure out what you want. Have you? Yes, Victor said firmly. I want to stop living a lie. I want to be with you openly and honestly. I know I've made mistakes, huge ones, but I'm ready to face the consequences. I'm ready to start over if you'll let me. Marcus looked at him for a long moment, his gaze searching for sincerity. You say that now, but what happens when it gets hard? When people start talking, judging, maybe even walking away? Are you ready for that? Victor nodded. I am. I can't control what people think or say, but I can control how I live my life. And I want to live it with you. Marcus exhaled slowly, the tension in his posture easing slightly. You've got a long way to go to prove that, Victor. But maybe I'm willing to give you a chance. Relief washed over Victor, but he knew Marcus's words were not a promise. They were a challenge. He had spent so much of his life running from the truth. Now it was time to confront it head-on, no matter the cost. The following week, Victor held a staff meeting at the gym. It was an unusual move, and everyone arrived with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. He stood before them, his usual air of confidence replaced by something more vulnerable. I owe you all an apology, he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. In the past few weeks, my personal life has become public in ways I never intended. I've made mistakes, big ones, and I've hurt people I care about. But I'm done hiding who I am. He paused, scanning the room. Some of you may judge me for this, and that's your right. But I want to be honest with you, because this gym is more than a business. It's a community. And I owe it to this community to be the best version of myself. The room was silent as Victor continued. I'm gay. For years, I've kept that part of myself hidden out of fear. Fear of judgment, of rejection, of losing what I thought mattered most. But I've realized that living a lie isn't living at all. There were murmurs, some shocked, others supportive. Victor held his ground, his gaze unwavering. If anyone feels they can't continue to work here because of this, I'll understand. But I hope you'll stay and help me rebuild. Not just this business, but the trust I've lost. As the meeting ended, a few staff members approached him, offering quiet words of support. Others remained reserved, clearly grappling with the revelation. But Victor felt lighter than he had in years. For the first time, he wasn't hiding. That evening, Marcus met him at the gym. They stood together in the dimly lit space, a place that had once been Victor's prison of secrets now becoming a symbol of his freedom. You really did it, Marcus said, a hint of pride in his voice. Victor nodded. I had to. For me. For us. Marcus smiled, and for the first time in weeks, Victor felt a glimmer of hope. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew it would be worth it. For the first time, he was ready to face it. Not alone, but with Marcus by his side. Victor's journey toward rebuilding his life unfolded slowly, with each step fraught with challenges. While coming out to his staff was a critical turning point, the public reaction was still looming. Amelia had kept her word, refraining from sharing their private matters with the media, but whispers inevitably made their way into the local fitness community. Some clients canceled their memberships, citing discomfort or vague excuses. Others rallied behind Victor, expressing admiration for his honesty. The gym's revenue took a hit, but Victor saw an opportunity in the adversity. With Marcus's encouragement, Victor began reshaping the gym's brand to focus on inclusivity. He introduced wellness programs geared toward mental health and partnered with LGBTQ+ advocacy groups to host events and workshops. The changes were subtle at first, but they signaled a new chapter for Sterling Fitness. A chapter defined by authenticity rather than image. One evening, as the gym wound down, Victor found himself alone in the training room. The weights were neatly racked, and the faint scent of cleaning solution lingered in the air. He ran his hand along the cool metal of a barbell, reflecting on how much had changed. "You still overthink everything," Marcus's voice broke through the silence. Victor turned to see him leaning against the doorway, a playful smile tugging at his lips. "Old habits die hard," Victor replied, setting the barbell down. "What are you doing here?" "Thought you had a client dinner." "I did," Marcus said, walking toward him. "But I wanted to see you." Victor smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. "You're gonna spoil me if you keep showing up like this." Marcus laughed. "Good. You deserve it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Marcus spoke again. "You know, I'm proud of you." "For what?" Victor asked, genuinely surprised. "For everything," Marcus said, his tone sincere. "For facing the truth. For not giving up when it got hard. For being brave." Victor looked at him, the weight of Marcus's words settling in. "Couldn't have done it without you." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe. But the hard part? That was all you." Meanwhile, Amelia was finding her own path forward. She had moved into the house she and Victor had once shared, the silence a stark contrast to the life they'd built together. At first, it was suffocating, but over time, she found solace in the stillness. She threw herself into her work, picking up new projects and rediscovering passions she had long put aside. Therapy sessions helped her process the betrayal, and slowly, the bitterness began to fade. One afternoon, she received an unexpected call from Victor. His voice was calm, almost tentative. "Amelia," he began, "I wanted to thank you for everything." She frowned, unsure how to respond. "Thank me? For what?" "For giving me the space to figure out who I am," he said. "And for not burning my life to the ground, even though you could have." A small laugh escaped her. "I thought about it," she admitted. "I'm sure you did," Victor said, his tone light. "But seriously, I mean it. You deserved better from me, and I'll regret how I hurt you for the rest of my life. I just hope one day we can find some kind of peace." Amelia was silent for a moment before replying. "Maybe, but it'll take time, Victor. For both of us." "I understand," he said. "Take all the time you need." When the call ended, Amelia felt an unexpected sense of closure. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like someone who had taken control of her own life. Months later, Sterling Fitness celebrated a relaunch. The event was smaller, more intimate than its grand anniversary party, but it was filled with people who believed in Victor's vision. Among the guests were Amelia, who attended out of curiosity, and Marcus, who stood proudly by Victor's side. As Victor addressed the crowd, his voice was steady and confident. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "This gym was built on the idea of strength, physical strength, yes, but also the strength to face challenges, to grow, and to be true to yourself. I lost sight of that for a long time, but I've learned that the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves." He glanced at Marcus, a small smile playing on his lips. "This gym is more than just a place to work out. It's a community, a place where everyone, no matter who they are, can feel seen, valued, and accepted. Thank you for letting me rebuild this with you." The room erupted into applause, and for the first time in a long while, Victor felt whole. He had faced the truth, rebuilt his life, and found love. Not just with Marcus, but with himself. As the evening went on, Victor looked around at the people who had stood by him through the storm. Amelia caught his eye from across the room, giving him a small nod. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close to it. And for Victor Sterling, that was more than enough. The relaunch of Sterling Fitness marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for the gym, but for everyone involved. It was a night filled with cautious optimism, new connections, and subtle reconciliations. As the event wound down and the last of the guests left, Victor found himself standing in the now-quiet gym, the hum of the air conditioning filling the space. Marcus approached him, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "To survival," he said, handing Victor a glass. Victor chuckled, the sound light and genuine. "To survival and to finally living the truth." They clinked glasses, and for a moment, the weight of the past months lifted. Victor turned to look at Marcus, a soft smile spreading across his face. "I don't think I've ever been more grateful for anything, or anyone, in my life." Marcus smirked. "Careful, Sterling. You keep saying things like that, and I might start expecting grand romantic gestures." Victor laughed, setting his glass down. "Grand gestures, huh? Like rebranding an entire business in the name of love?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Fair point. You're off the hook, this time." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the cleaning crew began tidying up the space. Victor felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He had come to terms with his truth, faced the fallout, and discovered that while life was messy, it was also resilient. Amelia's presence lingered in his thoughts. He had noticed her slip out midway through the evening, her expression unreadable. Victor knew they might never fully reconcile, but the nod she gave him was a small step toward understanding. It was more than he deserved and exactly what he needed. Months passed, and the gym flourished in its new identity. The changes Victor had implemented drew a fresh wave of clients, many of whom were inspired by his openness and commitment to fostering inclusivity. The staff seemed lighter, more connected, as if the truth Victor had embraced had rippled through the entire business. Amelia reached out occasionally, mostly regarding the final details of their settlement. Their conversations were civil, even cordial at times. During one such call, she surprised Victor with an unexpected comment. "You seem happy," she said. Her tone was neutral but laced with something like curiosity. "I am," Victor admitted. "It's still hard sometimes, but for the first time, I feel like I'm living the life I'm supposed to." Amelia paused, then sighed. "Good. You should be. We both should be." Victor wanted to thank her, to apologize again, but he sensed that silence was better. Sometimes, the most meaningful connections were the quiet ones. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Victor and Marcus sat on the gym's rooftop. It had become their tradition, a place to unwind and dream about what was next. "Do you think it's always going to be this hard?" Victor asked, gazing at the city lights. Marcus leaned back, a thoughtful smile on his face. "Probably. But we've got this, don't we?" Victor nodded, his heart swelling. "Yeah, we do." As the stars began to dot the night sky, Victor realized he wasn't afraid anymore. Not of judgment, not of failure, and not of the unknown. Life was far from perfect, but it was his messy, complicated, and beautiful in its authenticity. For the first time, Victor Sterling wasn't just surviving. He was truly living, and that was all he could ever ask for.